Good stuff, Brother Corey.
Yes, amen.
Got 20 minutes, so let's see if I can get this done in 20 minutes. I'm starting to become a long-winded preacher, huh?
Okay.
Book of Malachi, chapter 1. Malachi, chapter 1. That's the last book of the Old Testament. Malachi chapter 1 verse 6 says this. Everybody got out? I'm going to go ahead and know one. You guys can be seated. You don't have to stand. You can be seated. Malachi chapter 1 verse 6 says, "A son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is mine honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear, saith the Lord of hosts unto you? O priests that despise my name, and ye say, wherein have ye despised thy name?" Malachi chapter 3, verse 16 and 18 says, "Then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord, and that thought upon his name. And they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts. In that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them, as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Then shall ye return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not." Romans chapter 3, verse 12. Romans chapter 3, verse 12. "They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good. No, not one." One more scripture. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's stay there for a second. Romans chapter 3. Let's keep on reading. "They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Their throat is an open sepulchre. With the tongues they have used deceit. The poison of asp is under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace have they not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes." One more scripture and then we get into this message. Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10, verse number 28. "And fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. But rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." I just want to talk to you for 20 minutes on the missing ingredient. The missing ingredient. When someone is trying to bake a cake from scratch, they need to be sure that they have all of the ingredients needed for that cake to come out successfully. Amen to all the bakers. They have to make sure they add the correct amount of water, the correct amount of eggs, the correct amount of oil, or whatever else is needed to make the cake come out correctly. If you try to bake a cake without all of the necessary ingredients, a few things will happen. If you try to bake a cake without eggs, then the cake will come out as hard as a rock. If you try to bake a cake without oil, then some of the cake can stick to the pan. If you try to bake a cake without salt, you will not be able to taste the flavor of the cake. If you try to bake a cake and leave the baking powder, then the cake will not rise. If you try to bake a cake and leave out the sugar, then the cake will taste bland. If you attempt to bake a cake and you miss one of the many ingredients needed to bake the cake successfully, what you get on the outside, Brother Corey, is not what you get on the inside. You see, on the outside, it will look like a regular cake. From the outside, it will look like nothing is wrong. But the minute you go to take a bite of that cake, you'll notice that one of the ingredients is missing. Much of today's church is like a cake with missing ingredients. You got the ingredient of praise and worship. You got the ingredient of powerful preaching. You got the ingredient of different types of ministries. And on the surface, that's just like what the outside of the cake looks like. From the outside of a church with all those things appear to be great and appears to be good. But what you get on the inside, the heart of the things, you'll find that there is an ingredient that's missing in today's church. And that's the fear of God. You see, in life, we can fear many things. We can have a fear of the future, a fear of failure, a fear of losing the job, a fear of people, a fear of not looking good, or a fear of punishment. Many people, including Christians, are trapped by these fears. There are now more phobias than ever before. While these fears are increasing, one fear is decreasing, and that is the fear of God in the church. It is decreasing not just in the world, but also in the church. Yet the Bible commands that this is the only fear that we should have, and that's the fear of the Lord. We embrace every other fear but the fear of the Lord, because the fear of the Lord is becoming irrelevant in our daily lives. Sin has so affected the people of God in church today that we neither see the need for holiness, nor do we desire it. Our hearts are turned from God, and we've lost the fear of Him and His judgment. As we turn from God, we choose to disobey God, and we replace Him, His purposes, and His ways with something of the world. We substitute work, recreation, relationships with people, and the love for worldly things for our love for God. Yes. I'm talking about the fear of the Lord today. Amen. It's what's missing in the church. Yes. Of course, this is nothing new, as God's people have always had a tendency to depart from Him. The Bible is filled with examples of people who turned, lived in disobedience, and chose substitutes for God. You see, God knew His people would shift, so He warned them, if your hearts turn away so that you do not hear and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you this day that you shall surely perish. It seems the church would rather concentrate on the mercy of God rather than His fear. However, the Bible takes the fear of God very seriously. In the Old Testament, there are over 158 verses directly related to the fear of God. This is part of the problem, however. You see, because Christians see the God of the Old Testament as one to be feared, but the God of the New Testament as one that flows in mercy. But we have to realize that the God of the Old Testament is also the God of the New Testament. Amen. He flows in both grace and judgment, just as much before as Jesus came into the world. You see, the God who destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament is the same God that killed Ananias and Sapphira in the New Testament. Yeah. There are over 40 references in the New Testament calling us to have a fear of God. The church has lost her fear of God. When you can practice open and secret unrepentant sin, when you can harbor bitterness and hatred and unforgiveness towards a fellow Christian, we have developed a flippancy attitude towards God. You see, we treat God as if He's just some ordinary dude off the street. We treat God and we talk to God as if He's just our boy or our homeboy. There is no reverence of God. There's no, we're no longer standing in awe of God. There's not a hunger and a thirst in our hearts to get closer to Him. All we want to use Him for is what He can bless us with. But there's no fear, there's no awe, there's no reverence for His